Part 2, Healthy Relationships and Sexuality. Part 2 of this three-part series will focus on understanding different types of relationships as well as how they develop and evolve. Talk, touch, and trust will be looked at, as well as recognizing the difference between healthy and unhealthy relationships. Developing and maintaining friendships is an important component to this part, as is dating and romantic relationships. Making decisions about having sex, types of communication, and resolving conflicts in relationships rounds out part 2. So understanding different types of relationships. Identify and distinguish between types of relationships, including family, romantic partners, acquaintances, helpers, and strangers. Identify aspects of talk, touch, and trust that are appropriate with people in different relationships. Relationships are about the kinds of connections we have with other people. With some people, our connection is very strong. Our bond with these people often involve love and affection, and sometimes intimacy. At the other end of the spectrum are people with whom we have no personal connection. These are people we do not know. In between the two ends of the continuum are people with whom we have a connection and with whom we share common interests, goals, and activities. Within our spectrum of relationships, the way in which we interact with people will differ. What we say to other people, how we touch one another, and how much we trust others will vary greatly depending on the kinds of relationships we have. Recognize the importance of family, the different kinds of families, and the roles of family members to correctly identify people as helpers, acquaintances, or strangers, and to recognize the ways that relationships change or evolve over time. So with regards to family, a family member is someone who is related to you or sometimes someone with whom you've grown up. Family members can be people who are close to us and whom we love, mother, father, brother, sister, grandparent, or maybe people who we are related to but we are not as close with, cousins, aunts, and uncles. Family members are usually a source of love and affection. When we are younger, our families help to give us the things we need to survive and grow. Families give us a sense of belonging and share happy or sad times with us. A helper. A helper is someone who helps to do things. A helper is someone who helps us do things or does things for us as part of their job. A helper can be a doctor, dentist, teacher, police officer, firefighter, and so on. Helpers such as nurses and doctors may touch us, but never in romantic or sexual ways. Sometimes we share personal feelings with a helper if we need help to deal with a problem we are experiencing. An acquaintance is someone we know, but not very well. We do not usually share personal feelings or choose to spend our free time with acquaintances. As we get to know acquaintances better, they sometimes become friends. And a stranger is someone we do not know or someone we just met. A stranger is someone we know very little about. A stranger is someone we do not share personal feelings or trust. We usually do not talk to or touch strangers. If necessary, go through with your learner the ways to identify people as helpers, acquaintances, or strangers. So, some skills. So, distinguishing skills, developing the ability to identify and understand differences in the context of relationships. Number 2, personal and social interaction skills with the context of different relationships. 3, skills for keeping safe through learning about aspects of talk and touch that are appropriate in various types of relationships. So when it comes to distinguishing skills, understanding that depending on the type of relationship we have with the person will determine how we behave when we are with them, such as with a family member. It will be different than with an acquaintance. Number 2, a good example would be the types of conversations we would have with different people in our lives. With an acquaintance, we may discuss the weather or current events, whereas with a family member, we may discuss our personal feelings and experiences. And with regards to number 3, the types of talk and touch will depend on the type of relationship we have with a person. Relationships. The kind of connections we have with people, Some relationships are strong, often involve love and affection, sometimes intimacy. Some people we have no relationships with. These are strangers. And then in between spectrum, some connection with people with whom we share common interests, goals, and activities. Then there are family, friends, romantic partners, acquaintances, helpers, strangers. The way in which we interact will differ. In example, the way we touch or trust. So we want our learners to know that relationships evolve and change. Relationships can become closer and close. Relationships can become cool. Knowing how they evolve is important in helping us decide how we should interact with others. Knowing how they evolve is also important for making good decisions. Families have an important role to complement the learning. Relationships change and evolve. For example, people who are strangers may become acquaintances, and acquaintances may become friends. People with whom we are good friends with may become romantic partners. This process of evolving relationships may also work in reverse. Now we are going to have a look at the relationship ladder as proposed by Diane Maxim. So we first have attraction, then communication, feelings, intimacy or love, and responsibility. Climbing the ladder rung by rung takes realistic expectations. We need to explain to the learner that when it comes to developing a relationship with another person, we need to have realistic expectations. We want things to progress at a pace that both people are comfortable with. Let's have a closer look at each of the rungs of the relationship ladder. So attraction is the formula that brings two people together. Communication is the process by which we come to know each other. Feelings, as we grow in trust with one another, we share little secrets. We share more of ourselves, and confidence in each other is created. Number 4, intimacy or love, experience of unconditional acceptance of the other person as he or she is, requires choice, mutuality, reciprocity, trust, and delight in one another. 5, responsibility, an ability to respond. We do not consciously hurt each other emotionally, physically, or spiritually. Our responsibility. Therefore, our responsibility as teachers, service providers, caregivers, and parents is to help young people learn as much as possible about the following. Number 1, their bodies and feelings and acceptance of these. Number 2, conversational and social skills. Central to this is recreational skills. Have something to converse about. Number 3, appropriate conversation. Public topics for strangers and acquaintances, and private topics only for those close friends and families. Appropriate and responsible expression of sexual feelings. The concept of mutuality. Without self-esteem, we cannot hope to teach mutuality and responsibility in relationships. We must keep this in mind. Principles of autonomy and action. Principles of autonomy and action. So we must let our learners know. You are the most important person in your world. No one touches you unless you want to be touched. You do not touch anyone unless they want to be touched. There are very few people who hug you and who you hug. There are a few more people you give far away hugs to, friendly but not intimate. You shake hands with acquaintances when you are introduced to someone. You wave to children and nod to people with familiar faces. You have business touch with community helpers. You do not touch strangers. Strangers do not touch you. You decide who can touch you. You decide when to say stop and when to walk away. Talk, touch, and trust. Important what we say and how we say it. How we touch one another and how much we trust one another within the context of different types of relationships. Example, close family member versus a stranger. appropriate and inappropriate touch, discerning what it is, what helper may touch us, what parts of the body would be appropriate for different helpers, medical doctors, dentists, physiotherapists, eye doctors, personal attendants, firefighter, to touch. Important to learn what helpers may touch us and where, and giving permission to touch. Recognizing healthy and unhealthy relationships. So assist in recognizing that sometimes relationships can be healthy, positive, and enjoyable, and sometimes they can be unhealthy, negative, and hurtful. Recognition of aspects that are healthy and unhealthy, rights that each person has as part of healthy relationships, and what to do upon realizing a relationship is unhealthy. So some skills needed. Skills needed to distinguish between healthy and unhealthy relationships. Skills for assertiveness and personal safety. So some constructive elements with regards to relationships include self-esteem, responsibility for self, flexibility, trust, honesty, and communication. While some destructive elements include control, selfishness, abuse, overdependency, jealousy, and dishonesty. When looking at healthy relationships, there's loving and caring for each other, being honest, listening to what the other person has to say, respecting each other's wishes and choices, trusting each other, enjoying doing things together, and enjoy doing things by ourselves. Being able to share our feelings with each other about problems and disagreements, being able to be ourselves and reach our own potential, and feeling good about ourselves. Unhealthy relationships, being selfish or thinking about ourselves, not being honest with each other, hitting or talking to another person in ways that are hurtful, not respecting each other's wishes and choices, being jealous or angry when someone talks or spends time with other people, feeling that we need to be with the other person all the time in order to feel happy, not being able to talk or otherwise communicate with each other, feeling unhappy when you are with someone and happy when you are not with that person. Declaration of rights. So you have the right to be treated in a caring way, be treated as a valuable person, be respected, feel safe at all times in your relationship, make your own choices, and to say no to something you do not like, and to be told the truth. Rights versus responsibilities. We have the right to healthy relationships, and we also have the responsibility to ensure that we treat others in the same way. Developing and maintaining friendships. Identify what it means to be a friend and the qualities and characteristics that people usually value in friends. Identify and demonstrate positive ways to greet friends and introduce them to other people. Identify safe places to meet people who may become friends. Identify activities that friends can do together and ways friends can be together. Identify ways to keep friends. So some skills may involve communication skills within the context of friendship, skills for developing and sustaining friendships, skills to distinguish between friendships and other relationships. So general qualities important to friendships: loyalty and trustworthiness, reliability, sympathy and empathy, good listeners, kindness and compassion, giving genuine compliments, keeping confidence, and giving room to grow and change. Then we're going to look at dating and romantic relationships. So identify differences between romantic relationships and other relationships. Identify the meaning of dating, steps in making a date, safe places to go on a date, and expectations that may arise from going on a date. Identify different types and stages of romantic relationships. Identify and distinguish between different stages of romantic relationships. Identify types of sexual expression with romantic partners. Identify considerations for making decisions about having a sexual relationship with a romantic partner. Identify considerations for ending a romantic relationship. So, some skills may include making decisions, personal safety skills, social interaction and communication skills, skills for distinguishing between romantic relationships and other types of relationships, and skills to end romantic relationships. So the different stages of romantic relationships. So some activities. Number 1, spending time together. Number 2, doing things for each other. Number 3, having fun together. Number 4, sharing thoughts and feelings. 5, writing notes, letters, emails, or texts. 6, exchanging gifts. And we also need to let our learners know that these feelings develop, or these stages develop over time, and both people may not have the same feelings as the other. So, physical closeness and sexual feelings could include hugging, holding hands, putting an arm around each other's shoulder and waist, kissing, and touching. Discussing consent with your learners is very important. Be sure to talk about the right to say no. They have the right to say no at any given time, as does their partner. If their partner says no, they must respect that, just as their partner is to do the same for them. No means no, no matter what level or stage of physical closeness you are sharing. So, different stages, making commitments to one another, may include making joint decisions, working towards shared goals, or making future plans together. Now we're going to look at identifying unhealthy romantic relationships. When you cannot be honest about your feelings and cannot talk about them freely with your partner, usually feeling unhappy or even feeling trapped, think you can make your partner's problems go away, sometimes wish you were somewhere else or with someone else. So, possible signs of unhealthy relationships in your partner. Wants to know where you are and who you are with at all times. Will not let you talk with others, even if they are your friends. He or she is very jealous. Criticized your friends or family and asks you to stop seeing them. Makes you feel bad about yourself. Scares you by driving too fast, drinking too much, or doing other risky things. Has threatened to hurt you or has hurt you even if he or she is sorry afterwards. Makes threats about hurting your friends or pets, or threatens to hurt him or herself if you do not obey or agree. Pressures you to do sexual things you do not want to do, uses put downs, does not respect your decisions to practice safe sex. So, things to consider when you feel that the relationship needs to end. Make the decision. Looking at different choices and their consequences. Be ready for difficult or uncomfortable feelings. Your learner may feel sad, afraid, lonely. Choose a good place to end the relationship. If you choose to do so in private, make sure it's a place where you can leave. Or if you're afraid that the other person could become aggressive and violent, you may want a public place. Ending the relationship. Give your reasons. Talk about your beliefs and feelings. Use I statements. Make the end final. Do it without making future plans and promises. It is okay to agree to remain friends if you wish to do so. Think about safety. Change the locks if necessary. Making decisions about having sex. There are a number of important questions and considerations that need to be considered before deciding to have sex with a romantic partner. Some individuals may want to consider these questions before engaging in activities such as sexual intercourse, sexual touching, as well as mutual masturbation. We also want to keep in mind that we may have to discuss what having sex means. Having sex can be defined as sexual intercourse, involving the male putting his penis into the female's vagina, as well as other types of sexual contact, including oral and anal sex between males and females or between same-sex couples. Things to consider before making the decision to have sex. 1. Do both I and my partner feel ready to have sex now? Have my partner and I talked about what having sex means to our relationship? Number 2, do I know my reasons for deciding to have sex now? 3, will I feel good about myself if I have sex now? 4, am I sure no one is pressuring me to have sex? 5, can I say no to sex without feeling guilty? 6, can my partner and I discuss openly the prevention of sexually transmitted infections and pregnancy? 7, do my partner and I know enough about how to prevent sexually transmitted infections and pregnancy? 8, are we ready to handle the possible consequences of being sexually active? 9, if the relationship breaks up, will I be glad to have had sex with this person? So, communication and relationships. Recognize the importance of communication in developing and maintaining healthy relationships. Identify different ways of communicating in relationships. Identify and demonstrate ways of communicating without using voices. A few examples are body language, facial expressions. Identify and demonstrate ways to listen actively to others. Identify and demonstrate ways to communicate assertively with others. Identify and demonstrate ways to deal with conflict in relationships. Some skills that may be needed: general communication, active listening, communicating in assertive ways, and skills for personal safety. Types of communication: body language, being an active and effective listener, showing you value people, learning to express feelings and knowing what it takes to resolve conflict, identify ways to communicate with our bodies, explore nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication, sometimes the use of body language to send messages, is done without a lot of or any afterthought. We often express our feelings or emotions through a variety of facial expressions and body stances. This can happen without us wanting it to or even knowing that it is happening. Identifying and understanding nonverbal communication is sometimes difficult. It means that we need to be able to interpret what another person is telling us through a variety of expressions, gestures, postures, and so on. While sometimes difficult, it is an important part of communication in many different types of relationships. Active listening, what it involves: listening respectively, making eye contact, being aware of your own body language, paying attention to the feelings that the other person is expressing, being careful not to interrupt, and trying your best to understand what another person is saying. Ask them to repeat or say something in another way if you're having a hard time understanding. Listen carefully to all people. Practice and reinforce. It may be helpful to model each of the skills. As an optional activity, you may wish to help learners explore more deeply the ways in which they can check their understanding of what another person is saying through the use of clarifying questions or paraphrasing. The reinforcement and practice of these skills may be particularly useful for individuals who may have difficulty understanding words and concepts. Assertive communication. People who use assertive communication treat others with respect and expect to be treated the same way. They are more effective at asking for what they want and at saying no to things they do not want. Assertive communication is expressed by making eye contact, sitting or standing straight but relaxed, using a firm and usually pleasant tone of voice, not too loud, using statements or sentences that begin with I when talking about what you want, like, or do not like. Again, people who use assertive communication treat others with respect and expect to be treated the same way. They are more effective at asking for what they want and at saying no to things they do not want. You may want to present your learner with a situation or two and have them practice using assertive communication. Conflicts in relationships. People sometimes have arguments or disagreements with each other. This is a normal part of relationships. Conflicts in relationships happen when people have disagreements or arguments with each other. Sometimes disagreements or arguments can be over small things or bigger things. Arguments or disagreements can happen in a variety of different types of relationships. In healthy relationships, arguments and disagreements are often worked out or resolved because people communicate with each other effectively and are willing to compromise. Give an example of the difference between disagreements or arguments over small things or bigger things. So, an example for a small thing might be what TV show to watch or what to have for lunch. And an example of a bigger thing might be whether or not to move or to have children. Resolving conflict in relationships. So, the steps in resolution. 1. Each person states his or her point of view about an issue. 2. Each person states back what the other person said to acknowledge the other person's point of view. 3. Work out an agreement, if possible. Working out an agreement does not always mean we get what we want. Compromises. Working out an argument does not mean that we should be forced to do things we do not want to do. We have the right to say no. Working out an agreement sometimes means we make compromises because we see and appreciate the other person's point of view. Resolving conflict requires that people be honest with each other about what they think or feel about issues. Thank you for joining me for part 2 of this 3-part series. In part 3, we will be discussing the exploration of boundaries, trust, and ways to keep safe.